August is the most complex, frustrating month for beekeepers. I'm referring to the time of year, usually very late in summer. You're getting ready to kind of feed your bees maybe in the fall, or you're getting your bees kind of combined together. Maybe you're taking weak hives and combining them with stronger hives. It's a time of the year where the bee season is basically over and you're just trying to buckle down for winter. So let's jump right into it. Number one, this is a time in most places when we face a dearth. And that means that, wow, the flowers, the floral source, the nectar, it's just dried up. It's not much out there. Number two, there's a brood reduction. The brood reduction always happens when there's a nectar reduction. The third thing that we face in the month of August is mite increase. The infestation level of mites is skyrocketing in the month of August because we've had all these generations of bees leading up to the month of August. Our hive is at its maximum population. The fourth issue that we face is honey harvest. The fifth challenging part of August is a queen issue. The sixth challenge is swarming. Now here's the biggest issue that we all face in August that can really cause our colony to perish down to nothing. Tip number 7, challenge number 7 is all about robbing. Now this is one that I hear all the time. Challenge number 8 is I just can't really inspect my colony because they're so defensive and they're so crowded and they're so mean and it's so hot and so many bees are hanging out on the outside and they're not foraging, and as soon as I open it, robber bees start attacking my open boxes. Inspecting your colony in the month of August is a real challenge, which leads right into number 9. For me in Illinois, August, dog days of August. It's hot for my bees. It's hot for me to work my colonies. Lastly, this doesn't seem like a challenge. It should be a good thing, and it is, but your hive is overcrowded. Now let's work through these 10 challenges of August, and before we get into the ways to deal with them, I want to encourage you guys to please subscribe. Bobblehead David is here. He's saying please subscribe to my channel. It means so much. Give me a thumbs up. Watch the video all the way through. Now let's talk about the dearth. How do you maximize this dearth opportunity? A dearth means that there's a great reduction in the nectar flow. Many of you have told me for years that your hives look really strong. They had a lot of nectar on them, you know, in the month of August or September. And maybe you're a winter like me. My winter gets cold around November and December. But by then, oftentimes my bees, because of dearth, they've eaten through their honey stores long before winter has gotten here. And so what I like to do is always feed my bees 2 or 3 weeks after a dearth sets in. I'll wait 2 to 3 weeks after I notice a dearth, and then I start feeding my bees 1-to-1 sugar water with additives such as Honey Bee Healthy, pollen powder, protein substitute like Ultra Bee, and then I also put in Honey Bee Healthy, about a teaspoon each of all 3 of these things into 1 quart of 1-to-1 sugar water. I don't boil it. I just mix it really good and I feed it to my bees from a top feeder. Please, I beg you, do not use an entrance feeder in the fall. That will probably cause your colony to be robbed out. You can use community feeders, but you got to keep it 60 yards out somewhere so that bees aren't attracted to the feed by coming too close to your hive and then robbing your hive. So get it far away from your hives. Which leads us right into the second challenge of brood reduction in the fall. That used to be the hugest problem I had in the old days of beekeeping. Since there wasn't a strong nectar flow for me, my bees couldn't consume enough nectar to produce enough royal jelly. And so as a result, the brood would dry up, the larvae would. So what I've done over the last decade and a half is I start feeding my bees this 1-to-1 sugar water with the additives so that the nurse bees can take care of what the queen is laying and raise the larvae, giving them the proper nutrition they need. So those are bees of winter physiology. So rather than face a brood reduction in the fall, by feeding them, I face a brood increase in the fall of bees of winter physiology. Oh, it works so great. But the third problem is mite increases as well. So as we raise more bees all year, and as we raise more bees of winter physiology, we want to keep our mite levels low, or else the bees are faced with having viruses that will cause them to die prematurely. So all year long, we try to keep our mite levels low, below 3%, and then as we get closer into August, we keep trying to break the queen's brood cycle for 7 days by caging her in a push-in queen cage, or by using some green drone comb, screen bottom boards, or bringing out the big guns of maybe some acids like Formic Pro, trying to keep the mite levels down before we start raising bees of winter physiology. Better to start with mites at a minimum. Now, the fourth part of these challenges is honey harvest, accidentally killing your queen. And you know, I'm not going to say that I've been perfect in that area. I've lost a few queens when I've tried to harvest my honey. And a lot of times it's just because the colonies are so big that it's hard to keep track of where the queen is when you're pulling supers off, especially if you're not using a queen excluder. I rarely use a queen excluder, and so oftentimes my queen can be up a little bit in the center of those honey supers, and I might be brushing the bees out of it, or I may be using some type of chemical or something like honey robber, some honey bandit, trying to get the bees to run out of that super so I can harvest it, and consequently I can lose track of my queen and take her with me or accidentally kill her. It happens so frequently. You'd be surprised when you think you're not going to kill the queen during your honey harvest how easy it is to do that, to misplace her and take her away or something. So the best way to do the honey harvest is, as you begin to harvest your supers, you have to be very diligent to make sure that the queen is safely somewhere else other than in your supers, especially if you're not using a queen excluder. So in my case, here's my recommendation to you. Pull your supers off with the bees on it, get into your deep boxes, find your queen, put her in a cage real quick. Put her in a queen cage or a pushing queen cage, confine her for a moment, or set that frame aside that she's in. Now you can manipulate your honey supers and brush bees off and take your honey supers away. And then you just take your queen out of the cage or lift off the pushing cage when you're done manipulating your honey supers and removing them. That's a great tip on keeping your queen safe during harvest. Now, swarming in August seems like something we shouldn't have to be talking about, but it happens so often. It's just insane. I've seen it so many times before where I may have 4 or 5 swarms in the area here, and in August I'll see 1 or 2 swarms. It still happens. So you got to be ready for that. So you need equipment to put your swarm in. Keep your swarm boxes up if you're trying to catch some swarms. But the best thing you could do is keep trying to keep your eyes on your hive inspection to make sure they're not raising swarm cells. Get ahead of the game, and that way you can manipulate your frames, tear down queen cells, confine your queen in a queen cage until you can do all that. But you need to manage your hive in such a way, as a good beekeeper, you want to manage your hives to prevent a swarm. And that means giving them the room they need to expand, which is tough to do in August because sometimes you don't need to put another deep on, you don't need to put another honey super on. There are just so many bees, they want to swarm. So what can you do? Let me give you 2 quick tips, and they're kind of like, uh-oh, we're in trouble, let's punt kind of approaches. But the first thing you can do is make a temporary split. And what I mean by that, you're going to put this hive back together, but right now they're so big that they're going to swarm and you really can't add another box. So just do a walkaway split and divide them up. And that way you can maybe put a temporary box on which has drawn frames on them on both your deeps that you've separated, and that you can kind of have 2 hives for a minute to allow expansion to prevent this swarm, giving them a little bit room temporarily by separating them. Now, you'll want to put them back together. If they raise another queen, you'll have to pinch 1 queen, put a newspaper down in maybe another month from now, and then combine these hives back together. Don't try to overwinter these splits that you've made just to give your hive more room. You might be able to pull it off, but unless you're an expert beekeeper in doing this, you might be gravely disappointed that you took a nice big hive and split it to 2 small hives and both died during the winter. So that's kind of a punt situation, like they're gonna swarm because there's so many bees, I gotta separate them, right? It's a temporary solution to eventually get them back together as one single colony. A second option that I'm not crazy about is you can put a queen excluder on your bottom board, between the bottom board and your first deep. The queen can't go through it if she wants to swarm. So if they raise swarm cells and you can't get back because you're in vacation in Europe, then put that queen excluder on between the bottom board and the deep, and that way the queen can't swarm and they won't swarm. But drones can't go through that, And so drones can die trying to go through there, or die just because they can't go outside the hive and die. And they can kind of create this blockage. So you should only leave that on there temporarily to help you gain control of the swarming tendency. But it's one way that you can, in a pinch, keep them from swarming. Again, the best technique is to be a good manager of your colony and just work this hive so that you're tearing out and observing swarm cells and keeping it from happening. Now, robbing is bound to happen. Let's face it. Robbing is such a serious issue. Before I jump in there, though, let me tell you, I've got a live stream every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, where I simply just answer your questions. You really need to take advantage of this. I'm working hard for you guys, trying to help you out. I love you guys, and I love talking to you in our Beak Squad live stream every Thursday, 7 p.m. I'll see you there. Let's get back to answering this issue of robbing. Bees are pretty aggressive on storing up for winter. You want them to be. You want your hives to be strong, full of honey for winter. But you can't tell your bees to stop being naughty and going to other colonies and robbing. You just can't convince them to do that. That's part of their survival instinct. And so what you have to do is protect your smaller colonies with robber screens such as this one that tack on to the bottom board in the front of the hive and have little doors at the top that your bees can figure out how to go in and out up here, but the robbers are attracted down here by the smell and they can't really figure out to go up here. You may have to change it. Your robbers may figure these doors out after several days, and if that's the case, at night, go ahead and close this one off and open the other side up, and your robbers are confused again. Hopefully this will buy you enough time to prevent robbers from going in and out until robbing season stops. Another way that you can help prevent robbing or maybe cut it down is by doing a community feeder. Just feed the robbers, give them what they want. Set up a feeding station, maybe 50 yards out somewhere with some 1-to-1 sugar water, some sticks in it, and let the bees go out there. It's going to be easier to go out there for your robbers than to attack your colony and try to steal honey. Plus, it helps your bees that are wanting some nectar to go out and fly and get it. Now, August can be a month of very challenging inspections because all the bees are usually home. Not many are out there foraging because there's a dearth going on. It's hot outside. Your colony is so populated. And so you kind of get discouraged in making these inspections. But this is a time when you really need to be doing inspections for mite control. You need to be doing mite tests. And so how do you inspect your colony when they're so full, they're very defensive, they have a lot of honey to protect? What do you do? Now, I've taught this many times before, but I know some of you are brand new to my channel, but let me just go over it again. I prefer that you open up a hive, maybe with 2 deeps and a super. Just open up a hive, remove the super, and then take that first deep off to another area. Maybe you can set up a little picnic table like I do and put the top back on, the super back on the top. So you now on the colony, you have 1 deep and 1 super with the top on it, but you have a deep with 10 frames that you can move away from the hive, and now there's less bees, the hive is closed up. Now you just inspect 10 frames. And so now you can look at the 10 frames, check your queen, how she's laying, then you can go back and put that deep back. Maybe that 1 deep will give you all the information that you need for that either mite test that you're doing or to see and evaluate how your queen is laying. How do you handle a very hot August when it comes to your bees? Let's cool that hive down, people. Let's put some shade on top. Take a 4x4 piece of plywood and put it on top of the top cover with a brick or something to hold it down. That's going to provide shade from 9 o'clock in the morning till maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll help the colony stay so much cooler. If your hives are close to your house and it's a really hot day, just dreadfully hot, take a water hose and spray her down. Just get something in there to help them cool off. Make sure your bees have a water source they can go to, because that's when they're really trying to cool their hive down, is by in the hot days they're trying to get water back into the hive and kind of drop it down on frames, and that's how they do ventilation of fanning their wings over that water, and they can keep that inside of the colony much cooler if they have a good water source. So don't forget to give them a water source that they can fly to, but you also need to stay cool. I had a friend that had a heat stroke working its colony, so don't do that. Be hydrated, people. I want you to drink well. You need to hydrate yourself before you go out there. Don't wait until you get thirsty and then forget your water or something. Hydrate yourself a few hours before you go and do your inspection. Take some water or Gatorade, sports drink or something with some electrolytes. Stay hydrated and try to stay in the shade as much as you can. If you're working your bees out in the sun and it's just horribly hot, take a break every 15-20 minutes or between hives. Sit in the shade for 5 or 10 minutes, cool down, take a break, keep yourself cool. Also, you can put a quarter under your top cover and help the ventilation of the hive. A little bit of passive humidity can be pulled or pushed out of the hive, and that will help a lot. Just try to provide a little bit of ventilation at the top, not enough for bees to go in and out. Now, what do you do when your bees are overcrowded? Some of you send me pictures of bees hanging out on the front. They're bearding. There are just so many bees on the front. You're just like, oh my gosh, is this swarming? Could be, because sometimes swarming is caused from overcrowding. But many times in the fall, it's just a sign that it's so hot that some of the bees are having to wait outside until the inside of the colony cools down, or else they're going to scorch and kill, developing pupae. Now, what can you do to help your bees not be so overcrowded? There's very little you can do except provide them more room. Now, if you're fortunate enough as a beekeeper to have some drawn comb, you can actually give them a temporary box. You're not going to leave it on there very long, not all winter, because you don't want to go through winter with 3 deeps usually. But you may want to give them a 3rd deep to get more room, and that way they can spread out a little bit. But keep in mind, you're going to have to brush those bees off and combine 3 deeps into 2 as you get closer to winter. But heck, it's not a bad idea to give them a little more room when they're that crowded. But just keep in mind, you've got to combine them back to 2. Otherwise, there's a lot of room to keep heated up in the hive in the wintertime, and we don't want to make them work that hard to keep so much room inside their colony warm for winter. It's better to have 2 deeps and 1 super maximum to overwinter with. Now, I have some great tips on how to avoid doing wrong inspections in the month of August. Made a video for you guys right here. Check it out.